My name is Steve Kurtz. I'm one of the members of the Young Israel of Hollywood Diversity Awareness Committee, and I want to welcome everybody to our final speaker of our programming year. We're very happy. We've had a great kickoff to this year. We've had a number of speakers that have come from very diverse backgrounds, have shared a lot of personal stories, personal messages. I think we've gotten a lot out of the speaker series that we've had this year. We look forward to expanding it more next year and perhaps bring some additional programming to our community here in Florida based off some of this. If anyone who has joined us wants to be part of the committee, has more suggestions for the upcoming year, feel free to reach out to me. Hopefully everybody can find me through my email, through the show, through however else, and welcome anybody's comments or suggestions for the upcoming year. I want to, of course, thank Rabbi Freiberg, who's helped organize us with all of this, as well as Rabbi Weinstock, the Merodatra of our community here in Florida. And with that, I want to welcome our speaker for tonight, Mira Baum. Mira is coming to us live from Baltimore, Maryland. The beauty of Zoom, that we can have people come from all over the world. I was connected to Mira through Shira Clemens, who was also a student at University of Maryland College Park. I believe was a similar major to Mira, and I think had a common friend, and through a connection with that, and through the Hillel, we met up through that way. So I have my water bottle here. So rah rah, go Terps! I'm very excited for Maryland, and my son Aaron, who was a rising senior there at Maryland. So Mira came to my attention through an open letter that she wrote to the Jewish community, published, I believe, in one of the Baltimore online publications, and kind of went a little viral, whether it's through the Twitter or Facebook or wherever else. And I read her letter, and it really resonated with me and really spoke to her story and her message and her thoughts. And I said, like, wow, she's just sounds amazing. And I really want to have her become a speaker as part of our diversity awareness committee and our speaker series. So thank you, Mira, for answering my texts and my calls and all of that, and reaching out in that way. And I was very glad that you were able to be part of the conversation that we had on the phone. We spoke a little bit last week, and a very powerful message that Mira had, and I'm going to stop talking soon and let her speak a little more about this. So a lot of this grew out of some of the very shocking AAPI crimes, Asian American Pacific Islander crimes, hate crimes back really in March. There were some media and some very shocking stories, and Mira was brave enough to come out and publish this letter, really share this within the Jewish community in that way. So I really hope tonight can be an open conversation. Those who are joining, Mira has graciously agreed to answer just about any questions you may have. So feel free to use the chat to pose any questions you may have, and I'll try to get to as many of those as possible throughout the evening, and really allow kind of a flow of open conversation, to discuss about racism within our community and views of Asian American Jews, and really I welcome Mira again here tonight. Can you unmute yourself? Can I unmute you?
Yeah.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great. Thank you so much. So if you could just fill us in a little bit of who you are, just a little bit about your family, kind of, your background, and just a little bit of kind of your education would be super helpful to just fill us in on who you are and where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction, Mr. Kurtz, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for being here. I know this is the end of the year and we're all getting a little bit fatigued and it's the summer, so thank you all for being here and making this a priority on your Tuesday evening. I really appreciate it. So a little bit about me. My name is Mira Baum. I was adopted from China when I was 6 months old by a single mother in Baltimore, Maryland. And my entire family is Jewish and white. So that was my norm growing up. I went to a non-Jewish preschool, but then I transitioned into a Jewish day school in kindergarten up until 8th grade. And then I went to another private Jewish day school, but for high school, called Beth Phila in Pikesville, Maryland. And my middle school was Krieger Schechter Day School. So I grew up learning a dual curriculum. So I grew up learning Hebrew, learning Torah trope, all of those things. And I had Shabbat dinner every night. I went to shul and synagogue. I would say that I identified more with the Reform conservative level of Judaism. That's how I would identify myself. But I definitely hold true to valuing Jewish ideals and valuing the Jewish community. I definitely felt like they were my family growing up, and I still do. So I wrote this letter in March of this year, so a couple months ago, and I was presented with the idea by a family friend. He is the editor of the Baltimore magazine, J. Moore. And I published this open letter because unfortunately I had experienced some racism in the Jewish community growing up in those day schools and just within a very Jewish neighborhood. The Pikesville area in Baltimore, where I grew up, is basically entirely Jewish. So there were Reform, conservative, Orthodox, pretty much everyone of every sect of Judaism was there. And unfortunately, I had experienced some racism, and it didn't have to be overt. It could be small things like microaggressions and things like that. And I feel like we didn't really have that discussion growing up. I didn't have any of these discussions in high school and middle school and lower school. No one ever talked about this in the Jewish community. We always talked about anti-Semitism, and we talked about how to fight that. But unfortunately, growing up with white peers and white teachers, they didn't really ever discuss racism within the Jewish community. And I felt that though I felt intimidated by the offer to have to write this letter, because I felt like I had so much weight on my shoulders, and I felt very nervous to have to represent the entire Jewish Asian community with my letter. But then I talked to a friend who isn't Jewish, and she calmed me down and said, you know, this can be a personal thing. So I had been sitting down writing this letter probably for about 2 weeks. And then I just scratched all of it. And I sat down one night and I wrote it as if I was writing a journal entry, or as if I was writing a letter to one of my friends to describe how I felt. And that's what I sent in, and that's what was published. And I'm very thankful for J. Moore for giving me the platform to be able to have this freedom and to be able to mention everything that I wrote in the article word for word. So I really appreciate J. Moore for that. And I will answer any questions you have, but that's just a little bit about me. I did have a bat mitzvah, and I pretty much mentioned everything else. I went to the University of Maryland. I'm currently 22 years old, but that's the short, long bio.
You present yourself older than 22 years old, so you speak beautifully and eloquently, and you know, far better probably than I do, and I'm slightly older than you are, Mira. So I I give you credit with that. So you said you were adopted through a single mom, and you had other siblings, adopted siblings, birth siblings from your mom, or and boys, girls, older, younger. How did you relate with your other siblings in your family, and how were you treated, with all of them?
Mhm. So actually, my mom is here in the Zoom room. Her name is Gary Baum, and she's a single mother. So I don't have a father, but an adopted father, and I don't have any other siblings. So I was an only child, and my mom is a single mom. So it was just the two of us.
Oh,
So we are very, very close to my Bobby and Zadie, my grandma and grandpa, and we actually live in the same community, and we've always lived within 2 minutes of each other
wow.
because we hold our family so close and we're so tight knit. I had an uncle and I have an aunt. Unfortunately, my uncle passed away when I was younger, and my aunt does not have any children, and she's not married either. So I would say that I'm the only person in my immediate family of this age and in the generation that I'm in. However, I do have cousins who are like my immediate family who have been adopted. So I have a cousin who is 7 years older than I am. So she is 28, almost 29. And she was adopted from Russia. And I also have a younger cousin who is, I think 15, and he was adopted within the US. So it was a domestic adoption.
Mhm.
But I would say 3 adoptions within a family is pretty high. So I wouldn't say I felt isolated in terms of being an adopted child within the family, and I never felt like the odd one out. Honestly, when I was growing up within my family, I never felt like I was treated differently. I know as I've gotten older, I've had conversations with my grandparents and other people in the family who were always wondering whether or not perhaps it sounds pretty dark, but if they would love us or feel a connection to us, as in the adopted children within the family, as much as the biological children. And they say, 100%, we love you just as much. And we love you for you. And many times I've been told that they don't really see me as an Asian girl. They just see me as Mira. And these are the types of things that I was told growing up.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't say that there's anything inherently wrong with it. The intentions are good and pure.
Right. So it
However,
sounds, I mean, I just, I see your mom is on, and just give her a whole lot of praise in raising you in that way, and presenting you with an environment like that, you felt comfortable in that way, and to your Bubby and Zadie as well. I'm not sure if they're on or want to listen to the recording, and all the credit to them for providing for you in that comfortable environment in that way. You ended up in a Jewish day school environment, and I'm sure then you began to encounter other kids your age, so to speak, in that way. And I don't know if you want to share some of your experiences in your childhood, and um, how that went in that way.
mhm. So since my family raised me in an environment where I didn't feel inherently different, I went into school with that same innocence, in a sense, that I realized I was Asian and I maybe didn't have the same features as my mom and my grandparents or anybody else in my family for that matter, because they were all white, even the adopted children. I would say that the types of experiences that I would say now looking in hindsight are are taught racism. Those are things that I didn't really process as a kid. I didn't understand that they were hurtful, but I understood that they made me feel weird. To put it in the best, I can't really explain that, but to put it in the best way that I can. For instance, they would ask me, the kids would ask me about how to use chopsticks. They would pull their eyes back to mimic Asian presenting eyes. And they would say things like ni hao or konnichiwa to me. They would say things that I didn't understand. And I understood that they perhaps did this because I was Asian, but I would say that these kids did it with ignorance, but it doesn't mean that it's acceptable or that it's not hurtful.
Certainly.
So
It may not have had malicious intent, but certainly, as you said, out of ignorance, and it still is very hurtful to be the recipient of those types of slurs and stereotypes and microaggressions in that way. So do you recall how old you were when you were feeling this, or this was?
kids would say this to me in kindergarten. And things like this continued up until I was, I'd say, probably in 4th or 5th grade, in terms of those very ignorant comments and things like that. But I've also experienced them in college as well. So that was surprising to me. But these small little comments definitely build up and got to me as I got older, because I understood that as my classmates and my peers were growing older, they understood the connotations they held and how maybe the intent transitioned towards a more evil or just not a very kind intent.
So do you feel it's I don't know how to say this, you present differently than a white person. And if you're in a school of all white people, in the way your features present in that way, is it just juvenile in a way that children are, maybe the kid who's too tall or too fat or has freckles or has red hair or something like that? Is that, looking at just differences in that way and kids behaving that way? And or did you feel that it was, as you said, more out of ignorance?
I don't think I would ever want to compare hurtful comments in terms of presentation based off of weight and hair color or features on someone's face to comments about race. I would say they're different, but also I would say that they're comparable when they're kids. I would say that there's a difference between a kid having curiosity and a kid being taught that asking these questions are okay because they're children.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the comments that kids would make as they got older were things that they've heard, whether it be online or through their family, and then they repeated them,
Mm-hmm.
and they were hurtful. So I would say that I'm not hurt by those comments if a little child came up to me and asked me these very blunt questions.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't see it as anything bad. However, if they said something negative about it, then I would maybe say, where did you hear that from?
Mm-hmm.
But I would say if they're in middle school or if they're in lower school, I'd say probably around 3rd grade and up, I would say I would I would guess that they do understand what they're saying and that they do have some type of intention behind their words rather than pure curiosity or ignorance.
Right.
And unfortunately, since we don't have these conversations in school, um, where else are they going to be taught? And also, the kids like me, I didn't have these conversations, so I didn't know whether or not they were okay or not.
Right. You came into it, shall we say, innocent and kind of, I'll call it blind almost in that way of not being able to you know, able to process even some of the things maybe that were being said in that way. So Mira, you mentioned a little bit about the institutions themselves, about the day school schools that you went to, and looking, always mentioning about fighting anti-Semitism, or whether it's anti-Israel bias or
Mhm.
other things against the Jewish community, but never really speaking about racism or bias or hatred toward other communities that are non-Jewish or non-white, shall we say, in some of that way that people are, such as yourself, who are Jewish, obviously, and not presenting as white. You're not, in that way. And as you said, people are getting their feedback from whether it's online or whether it's parents or whether it's other people in that way that help to perpetuate those negative stereotypes and carry things in that way. So, so do you feel that, just your thoughts about the schools that you went to, and whether there's room there to start to have those conversations within them, or what opportunities we may be able to look at in that way?
Mhm. So I would say that the schools that I went to, I do not regret going to them. They provided me with a great education, both secularly and in terms of Judaism. I feel like I'm pretty knowledgeable about Judaism, and I have a strong connection to Judaism because of the Jewish day schools that I went to. Um, for my preschool up until 8th grade experience, I went to Krieger Schechter Day School in Baltimore. And I would say that none of the faculty ever made me feel different. They always made sure I was comfortable. They treated me equally as their other students, as great as their other students, and they wouldn't. I've never had an experience where a teacher at Krieger Schechter made a comment that was hurtful to me. So that's good to hear. However, they wouldn't see the things that, or hear the things that I would hear or see. So it's not like it was their fault that the students would say hurtful things, or it was their fault that they didn't face the consequence, or the teachers didn't, chastise the students for saying or doing certain things that would be considered hurtful. And I never brought this to anyone's attention, not even my family, nobody at school, not my friends. I didn't say anything because since there was no conversation, I thought it was fine. I didn't know how to process it. So I would say, for things to do in the future, I don't have solutions. And there isn't a solution, a single solution. However, I think definitely with you all being here and listening to my experiences, raising your family in a way that is aware of things that could go on, that could potentially go on, and prepare your kids at home by saying, how are you doing? How are your classmates doing? And just check in with them, and also maybe have a conversation with them about race or something like that. I don't know if you would rather do that or have the school do that. I know school should perhaps have some sort of thing that doesn't necessarily completely surround race, because that could perhaps seem isolating, because I was one of 3 Asian Jews in the school. So if there was a whole conversation about Asian Jews, everyone would stare at me and the other 2 Asian Jewish girls in the school. So it would be very isolating, and because it would be actually pretty frightening, like if I was in that age and they just all of a sudden had this conversation. I
Right.
think it should be something that should be incorporated in everyday conversations. It shouldn't be taboo. It shouldn't be something that they don't talk about, because many times, like, anything that is about racism is never talked about in school by teachers or something like that. It's always just treat each other with respect. But then it's like, well, the kids think they're treating me respectfully, but in reality, they're not. They could ask the question very politely. They could say, Mira, can you see as well as I can? Do you see less than I do? And they could ask it very politely. But it doesn't mean that the question is okay.
Right.
And I have been asked that.
Because of the ignorance, so to speak, that people have just about some of this as well. So you mentioned a little bit, I think it was in your piece, about active versus passive anti-racism. And I was thinking about, I guess it was the movie Finding Nemo, which I cried terribly at that movie, but that's just, I cry at a lot of things. So, and I don't remember the exact quote from the movie, but it was like, we're just swimming in the ocean, and all we know is the ocean because we're just all swimming together in the ocean. We don't realize there's kind of anything different because we're all just swimming together in the ocean. And the attitudes and the stereotypes and the way that people speak negatively, not even realizing, because they're just kind of in the ocean, and some of the hurtfulness that goes on, as you said, is more kind of out of ignorance, and we're all kind of going in that way. So talking about actively kind of going against that and being anti-racist actively versus just kind of passively floating along in the ocean, and hearing some of these comments, and how do you see that in kind of a personal way of how you encounter people?
Mm-hmm. So when I hear this question, I think about it in 2 ways. The first being that if you're active online, definitely amplify different perspectives. It doesn't just have to be Asian perspectives. It should be perspectives of people of all races, and amplifying their truths, their stories. Being open to listening about their experiences is an important step, and then sharing firsthand experiences is the first step towards becoming actively anti-racist. However, if you are not big at sharing things online, it's not necessary. But I would say, if you want to be actively racist in your community, actively anti-racist in your
Hope you're not
community,
actively racist.
actively anti-racist, I would say just be aware of these things. Like, you could read articles like I did, like I wrote, or you could read about different stories about what's going on in the world beyond the Jewish community. Because I know within the Jewish community, we tend to listen to a lot of news that's only perhaps about Israel or things in our immediate community, whether or not it's Jewish, I guess.
Mhm.
But I would say listening about the struggles that other people face in this country, because there could be Jews of that color who are feeling very isolated because they're not a typically white Ashkenazi Jew presenting person, but they do identify with Judaism and the Jewish community. And I can give an example. A lot of my friends who are Jewish, or acquaintances, I guess, from my schooling experiences, they have been sharing a lot of posts about Israel and Palestine lately, but they were dead silent about crimes against Asians. And there have been posts that have been so intense as to have said, if you're silent on this, then that speaks a lot about to who you are, and you are anti-Semitic. And in my opinion, I don't think it's called for to label someone because they're not sharing things on social media, because not everyone shares things on social media. But it is hurtful to see the people who are being so active right now, because this conflict that's going on in the Middle East is directly impacting them because they're Jewish, but they don't have any interest in amplifying other forms of racism, or I guess that something that mirrors anti-Semitism on their feed as well.
There are
So
hate crimes against Asians, against Blacks, against Latinos, against LGBTQ, community, and all of that. And I hear your point, and I certainly agree with you, Mira, that we tend to have a much more visceral reaction when it comes to Israel and it comes to anti-Semitism. But if we are to be taken seriously, that we want others to stand up with us against anti-Semitism, we have to stand with them when there is hatred against their communities, whether it's, religious hatred, ethnic hatred, all of this. I mean, the common word is hate, and there's no place for that. I think the ADL has a no place for hate campaign that they do, and they're not distinguishing for anti-Jewish hate or any other group. And I think that's a great message that we all can actively do to be more anti-racist and anti-hate in that way as well.
I would say that if you are looking, so if I said those stories to you, I can give you an application if that helps. I would say that reading up on these things, for example, my mom read a book called White Privilege, and read up on things about that, in terms of things that she may not be aware of, or the things in her, and there's a saying, like your backpack, you carry certain things that automatically allow you into certain spaces and give you the credibility that you need. So reading up on that, and how some other groups don't necessarily have those things, and how you could use your own tools to help people who are, I would say, who don't have those tools or those resources or those opportunities. And just being aware of it, passing these necessary discussions and these morals down to the younger generations so that they're more aware of this. I know also, I had an experience in college that I briefly mentioned in my open letter, where I was in college and my biology professor said, everyone who, in the beginning of class, she said, everyone who is observing Yom Kippur, please see me after class and I can write your name on a piece of paper so I know that you're excused for this lecture, for the next lecture for Yom Kippur. I kept that in the back of my mind. I walked down, I think 5 or 6 other girls walked down at the same time I did. And I would say that they were all white Ashkenazi presenting Jews. And when it got to me, there were 2 other girls left behind me, and I was standing with my roommate, who was also white Ashkenazi presenting Jewish girl, typical Jewish girl, very pretty, brown hair, brown curly hair. And she wrote her name down. And then on the piece of paper right after, I wrote my name down. And when the professor was handing the pen to me, she said, "Are you sure you're Jewish?" And my friend, my roommate, looked at me and her mouth was on the floor. She didn't know what to say. She had so much fear in her eyes. And I was taken aback and I said, "Yes, I'm sure I'm Jewish."
Wow.
And I said this as I was taking the pen with a ring on my finger that has the Shema engraved on it with my Hebrew name on the inside. And the 2 Jewish girls behind me, behind my roommate and I, they were also horrified and they didn't say anything. And I would say that's an example of being passively anti-racist, because after that whole ordeal, those 2 girls came up to me and said, "Are you okay?" And I appreciated that, but they didn't call it out and they didn't say that was wrong. I felt like I was very isolated in that situation, and I was put in this bubble because of my race, and it was assumed that I was lying about my religion to get out of a lecture.
Right. It's really insulting that one would even, I mean, and you obviously experience all the time because, you present as Asian versus Ashkenazi Jewish, that people may wonder, or just not realize that you are Jewish. And, but for a professor, to just unbelievable that they would do that, to think that you would try to skirt the lecture. Mira, you present as a very intelligent student that you wouldn't want to skip an exam or a lecture just to go sit in synagogue and fast all day. I would probably rather take the lecture, so to speak, that way versus the Kippur and all of that. So have there been other experiences in college that you've had, either positive or negative experiences within the Jewish community at Maryland where you were?
Unfortunately, I just want to preface this with saying I'm from Maryland, so obviously Maryland's my in-state school. There were a lot of other reasons, but a big reason was also the Jewish community is really great there, really huge, has a really good reputation. And I was really excited. So when I was a freshman student, it was the first Shabbat of the year. And this one is really, really big. Apparently a lot more Jewish students come out to this one. And I was really excited. And I went with my roommate, and it was a little bit intimidating because, we were freshmen, but everything was really exciting and I was nervous. But then as I walked in, so many people just stared at me. And that was isolating in and of itself. But then I started talking to other people. And I was like, yeah, I went to Beth Tefillah. And they're like, oh, I know someone who went to Beth Tefillah doing typical Jewish geography things.
Mm-hmm.
And as I sat down to eat the Shabbat meal, they were doing hamotzi. And a young man across the table from me went out of his way to ask me if I needed a translation or if I knew what prayer was being said right now, and if I wanted to know the meaning of what was going on. And that really hurt because I had had a bat mitzvah, and I felt like I knew more about Judaism than many other Reform Jews. And I knew the Hamotzi by heart. I know all the blessings. I know the whole Kiddush by heart. I can chant it like the back of my hands. And it just really stung, and it left a really sour taste in my mouth. And I made up an excuse to leave early. And then I didn't go to Hillel for about 2 weeks, and then I tried it again. And basically the same exact experience happened, but instead of with Hamotzi, it was with the Kiddush. And it was with a different person asking me the same exact questions, or making the same exact comments, and thinking that I didn't know what was going on. I was just a guest, which I was a guest, but meaning like a Jewish student brought me and I wasn't Jewish.
Right.
So ever since then, I have not ever gone to Hillel again because it felt completely isolating, and I was just hurt by both of my experiences, and I wanted to give it another chance, but then when I gave it another chance, I was shot down and discouraged.
Were there other, I'll call it non-Ashkenazi white Jews that were part of this? And no. So
No, I was the only Jew of color in Hillel, and I have talked to other Jewish people at Maryland who are not white, and they will not step foot into Hillel. They will not step foot into there.
obviously,
And there are also a lot of white presenting Ashkenazi Jews who will not step foot in there for the same reasons, because they feel like it's a very judgmental, unaccepting environment.
for people just make an assumption, I guess, being on a college campus, of which, although a strong Jewish community, there's still, vast majority are non-Jewish at the community, and making the assumptions that just because you're not Ashkenazi, that you are not Jewish, and that you would be only a guest there, and you have no knowledge of Judaism because you must be one of the non-Jewish Asian students who's coming to visit in that way, without any comprehension or consideration that indeed you are Jewish, and that you come with the full, shall we say, rights and responsibilities of being Jewish, and in that way. So it's kind of sad, Mira, I have to admit to you, because I have been to Maryland Hillel, and I know Rabbi Israel, and it's just terrible that you had that negative experience there. I mean, I wish that you hear about some of these questions, and I guess it has to do with more the institution necessarily than the individual. And there are clearly individuals who are insensitive or racist or ignorant or all of that, kind of in that way, versus an entire institution like a school or a Hillel or something like that. Our country has pushed a message of anti-racist on an institutional level, but we're still struggling, obviously, on an individual level with individuals, who feel that. So how have you made, your connections to Judaism? Obviously, it wasn't through Hillel in that way, and it sounds, that you've had, with your family, a lot of connections, and I assume other Jewish friends, or any other positive feelings that you've had about your Judaism. Maybe you want to share a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the positives are that I would get to go home for Shabbat meals, and I did that not too often, but it was really nice to go home and then have challah and stuff like that. My roommate, though she was horrified by what I told her, I don't think she ever understood how hurtful it was to me. So she understood why she would invite me every week to go to Hillel with her, but I wouldn't want to go. So she would bring me back some challah and she would bring me back some grape juice. So that was very kind of her that I would have challah and grape juice on Shabbat. But I did eat at the dining hall on Friday nights. So unfortunately, I didn't get to celebrate Shabbat every week like I normally would. But for holidays, I did light a menorah, and I did all of the other observances, I guess you would say. I just didn't go to Hillel for that. And I guess it wouldn't be like a traditional Shabbat meal at the dining hall. But other ways that I really kept up my Judaism was my family. College did not reinforce anything. In actuality, it probably deterred me a little bit. But I still am not going to judge my religion based off of an experience with a small portion of the Jewish community.
Well, I'm hoping that your letter, your conversation here with us, your really incredible strength to be able to speak openly and honestly about this is a way to help you, grow within your Judaism and grow within your love of Judaism and your love of across all types of Jews. That you have a great message as a Asian American Jew who loves being Jewish. You've always been Jewish. You've always had a obviously knowledgeable and in so many ways to be able to have a positive experience about being Jewish. I mean, you as you said, you are 22 years old, and you have, God willing, a long life ahead of you, and you should have a positive Jewish connection, with all of that in a way. So I hope that kind of continue in that way. You mentioned a little bit about some books and things and helping people to educate themselves about this. I read the book Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, which I recommend to those on the call, those who haven't read it. I'm not sure if you've had a chance, Mira, to read it. To me, not only is she an incredible writer, but she's a very really speaks about the different levels within our society based upon presentation and skin color and skin tone and all of that, and the active need to be more actively aware of these things in our world and in the biases and all of that we may have. So Steve Gluck is asking also if you or your mom has read the book The Bamboo Cradle, which I'm not familiar with, but maybe you can answer that, or your mom can answer.
Oh, my mom just answered. She said yes. She bought it when she adopted me, and the child that was adopted from the book lives in Baltimore in the Orthodox community.
Oh, that would be,
That's right.
it's good to hear. I'll have to read it as well. Another recommended book from Sharon Gluck also is about how to be an anti-racist by Ibram Kendi, who on my book, on my list, I got it, but I had to return it before I had a chance to read it. So I will get to that as well. So another question, Sam Sugar posted it, also Mark had posted with me, mentioned a little bit about the incident that you had at Hillel with the man who asked you about needing help with Hamotzi, and I guess I'll just read, if an offer to help with Hamotzi triggered and immobilized, how do you deal with other more kind of overt and serious triggers of things that are even more kind of hurtful in that way?
I would say that I am never fully prepared for these triggers, or I'm not prepared to be triggered, I would say. And I wouldn't say that it immobilized me, it just deterred me from Hillel at Maryland. And with dealing with it, I've learned that I should start talking to more people about things that are going on. So to answer someone else's question, yes, I have talked to Rabbi Ari Israel about this, who is the head of Hillel at Maryland. I have talked to him about this, and we've talked about different things that they could start instituting at Hillel to prevent this or address this and prevent it in the future. So we had a good conversation about that. Hopefully they do something about that. And thankfully, I haven't had extremely overt experiences. I haven't had many. I would say that the most intense one was during COVID, when references were targeting Asian Americans, like the phrase Kung flu and Chinese virus. People would like whisper that when they passed me, or they would mumble it under their breath, or say, "Go back to your country." And I didn't tell my family this, but I did sit down after writing this piece with my family to tell them all the things that have happened to me. And one man, he spat towards me while I was wearing a mask. So he didn't even see my face, he just saw my eyes. And that was, I guess, the most overt thing. And I would say that I shut down. I'm not too great or too prepared to deal with those things. And I don't think anyone would be if they were spat at for no reason.
No.
So it's difficult to answer.
I
would
would
say that I just talk to people.
Yeah, I think you're wise in that way in trying to deal with that type of overt, disgusting behavior simply based upon your ethnicity is just abhorrent in that way. And I feel bad that you've had to face some of those things. So I guess I can ask a question, but it's hard to answer in a way that, do you know other Asian American Jews? And if you've been, for example, if you were at that Hillel event where you were pegged as being non-Jewish simply because you were Asian, if there was an actual non-Jewish Asian who was at that type of event, and they were offered instruction or help or descriptions or whatever, how would you have felt necessarily with that? Again, I don't know if you've been in the situation or your thoughts about that.
Mm-hmm. So to answer your first question, I do know other Asian Jews. My mom and some other adoptee parents who have also adopted kids from Asian countries like Vietnam and China. We would all celebrate Chinese New Year together every year. And it was a group of all Jewish families, all white Jewish families who have adopted a child from an Asian country. And I'd say out of that, there were about 7 or 8 of us growing up, different ages. But I'd say I appreciated that, and But I did talk to my mom about this like not too long after the article, and I said I appreciated that, but it felt like more of a community for the parents than the kids, because for the kids it just felt like we were being smacked together because of our race. And I had nothing in common with most of them. So there were many years where I just probably threw a fit because I didn't want to go. Because I just felt like uh, I don't know. I felt very weird about it because I didn't enjoy myself as I got older. Um, but I do appreciate the gesture, and it is in hindsight very nice that I do know other Asian Jews because of that group, and um, it's very nice to hear. Um, and if there had been other Asian Jews at Hillel or any people of color who were Jewish at Hillel when I had gone to that Shabbat dinner, I definitely would have felt better, but the comment still would have hurt me just as much. Um, and I'm sure that other Jews of color would agree that even if there were other people of color in the room, but that was said to you, it would still hurt.
Do you feel that kind of within the Jewish community that you are, once people know that you are Jewish within the Jewish community, even, within the Ashkenazi Jewish community, and they meet you and may not realize that you're Jewish because they're ignorant and thinking that people who present Asian cannot be Jewish, but obviously they are. Do you feel once they know about you, have you been treated unfairly or really differently than other people? I mean, you kind of answer that a little bit about at the beginning, that you felt that you were treated pretty equal within your school system, at least from the administration and teachers in that way.
Um, I don't think it was ever verified whether or not I've been treated differently. There have been certain instances where I have felt like I was treated differently. In high school, I felt like I was treated differently by two teachers there. And I'm not going to say their names because I know that they're good people. But I did feel like, for instance, in one of the classes, I sat in the front row. I always raised my hand, never called on. And then during my mom's teacher meeting with the teacher parent meeting, the teacher said that I didn't participate enough and that he wished that I would be more confident in my abilities. And that was like really hard to hear because I didn't understand. And it didn't improve after that. But that's just one example of how I felt like I was treated differently. I can't attribute that to race. Maybe that was just something else, but it definitely, my mind went to that because I was the only Asian kid in the room and
Right.
I was doing everything that the teacher asked of me. So I didn't understand that. Um, but I don't think they've treated me unfairly. They might ask me questions, and I always welcome that. I know that there was a question earlier that said that was asking about had I been a international student and I wanted a translation. I think it that wouldn't have been racist to ask. However, I think what that student should have done is tried to talk to me first and see who I am, where I'm from, um, and like get to know me first before asking those types of questions rather than just making an assumption.
While can I assume that you don't speak any Chinese?
I don't understand. I can speak more Hebrew than anything Mandarin. I don't understand anything in Mandarin.
Neither do I. So we're on the same page, certainly with that. So Mira, it's come to the end of our time together. Is there any kind of last thoughts or things you wanted to share with our community?
I would say that though things are very dark right now and things may seem very dark, and a lot of our content that we consume ourselves with or anything that is pushed out to us, I don't think that should, it is sad and it's okay to recognize that it's sad, but I think it should just be a reminder that we need to work towards bettering this and becoming more aware of this and teaching our kids and having these discussions with each other, not making them taboo. I think in the Jewish community, we pride ourselves on treating each other as brothers and sisters and treat thy neighbor as thyself, and doing all of these things of abiding by Jewish laws and tikkun olam. And it's really important to do, but we also need to pinpoint our weak points. And we need to, in order to, and while pointing it out, it's not criticism. Well, it is criticism, but it's criticism with intention to make us better and stronger and more accepting and more welcoming as a community. And I think a lot of the times when anyone is called out, the first thing is their first instinct is to defend themselves, obviously. But I think we should all take that second to say, you know what? This is how they feel. These are the experiences that they're having. I need to listen to them and prioritize what they're saying to me right now, because though that may not have been my reality or my intention, the impact it had on them is real. And it's important to work against it and to educate ourselves and to, we want to amplify diverse voices. And by coming to this type of meeting, it's very important, I would say. And I really appreciate all of your time. And I would say my last message is to stay positive and just try to incorporate this and be more mindful of it. I don't think there's anything that you have to do right this second, but just being aware of it and looking out for it, and try to be an ally to Jews of color, to make them feel more welcomed and accepted in our community.
Thank you so much. You are awesome, and your credit goes to your mom and your family, and you know, you were really a mensch who can, you know, present beautifully and articulate your message and thoughts, and you know, I think we all can take your words immediately to action, and that's a great way to finish with that. So with that, I want to wish you a good evening, a good summer, a good congratulations on your graduation from University of Maryland, and really genuinely appreciate you taking the time to share all this within our community. So I see Mira has posted her email address in the chat, mirabaum8@gmail.com. If anybody has additional questions or they want to contact her privately, please feel free to reach out. So with that, wish you, thank you again, and have a good evening. Take care.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mira. You're wonderful.
Thank you, Mira.
And Stephen, I want to remember
Thank
how you
you.
cried during Finding Nemo.
Thank you.
Take care,
Thank you
everyone.
very much, Mira.
Thank you.
It's wonderful, interesting, inspiring.